I picked 4 books for us to talk about today about 4 different celebrities. The next book is also by Eliza Knight, at least half of it. This is Can't We Be Friends by Denny S. Bryce and Eliza Knight. Denny S. Bryce is another one that I absolutely love. She actually just had another book come out this week, and I'm super excited to read it. But her books are phenomenal. And I really enjoyed that they wrote this book together. I thought that was really cool. And I think that, especially, hold on, let me go back. This book is about Ella Fitzgerald and Marilyn Monroe. Ella Fitzgerald was a very famous singer in the 1950s. She was very, very ambitious, worked really, really hard, took really great care of her voice, was really particular to not party and be careful with her money. And she was very, very specific in how she spent her time. And Marilyn Monroe and her became fast friends. They wrote a lot of letters. They had this really interesting friendship that really ended up standing the test of time. And that's what this book is. And that's why it was cool that it was written by 2 different authors, because it's told from the perspective of 2 different women. And in a time when these 2 women easily may have never crossed paths, may not have been friends. They didn't run in the same circles. They didn't live on the same side of the country. They sometimes didn't even live in the same country, but they somehow stayed friends through all of the thick and thin that happened, specifically in Marilyn's life, which it was tumultuous. And that was one of the interesting things about this book, was to learn more about Marilyn Monroe, and not necessarily through the lens of her always, but also through her friend. And I just thought this was a phenomenal read, and I really enjoyed it. Our next book, this one takes place in the 1950s, 20s is the Della Stare. This is about Frank Sinatra and Ava Gardner. Frank Sinatra is an absolutely fascinating character. He's a fascinating person, and had a really interesting life. There were plenty of things that Frank didn't do well. Obviously, phenomenal singer and somebody that people still have on a regular basis today. You don't have to work very hard to find any of his music. And he also he was a womanizer. He was potentially in with the mob. There's a lot of very interesting things about Frank Sinatra's life. And this book talks about some of those, but it's really centered around his relationship with Ava Gardner. And it also talks about Ava Gardner's life. She was a small town girl turned into a Hollywood actress because she was gorgeous. She was not impressed with Frank when she first met him. They did end up married for a little while. And while they got divorced and were with other people for far longer, they always seemed to have a pull that brought them back together, no matter what it was. And that it was a really fascinating book, in that it was fascinating to learn about Frank, and it was fascinating to learn about Ava, and then it was also fascinating to learn about them together and to see how their relationship really builds and changes over time as they figure out how they can be in each other's lives, even if they can't be married, how they can be in each other's lives and be married, how they can be in each other's lives and not be married again. And it's just a really fascinating piece to talk about their relationship, which is utterly fascinating. It's amazing that it can take a whole book to talk about 2 people's relationship, but they were 2 people who had so much going on outside of their relationship and so much going on internally. It's incredible. The last book we're going to talk about today is called Meet Me in Monaco by Hazel Gaynor and Heather Webb. I think I missed saying that Strangers in the Night was written by Heather Webb. Phenomenal author. I'm a big fan. But this one is about Grace Kelly. And what's really interesting, so Grace Kelly was a 20th century actress, and in the 1950s she was very famous. And so this book starts when she goes to the Cannes Film Festival and is basically helped sheltered by this young perfumer in a boutique while she's trying to hide from the press. And so this book spans then 30 years of Grace Kelly's career and her other run-ins with this perfumer. It also has a British photographer in it, and it alternates between the perfumer Sophie and the photographer James, and is fed through Grace Kelly's life. So it's the love story of two other people as shaped by Grace Kelly's life, moving from her in Cannes for a film festival all the way through her becoming the Princess of Monaco, her wedding, and what that looks like. So it's a fascinating way to look at somebody's life because she's not a main character, but the story centers around her, which is a really interesting way to tell a story. And Grace Kelly is a fascinating figure, actress turned European princess. And I mean, we've seen it played out with Meghan Markle. It wasn't nearly as divisive or in the royal family or created as many issues, but Grace didn't enjoy being a princess as much as I think she probably would have liked to. At least that's what history tells us. It's impossible to know how she actually felt, but it's a really interesting way to interact with her life, and she's a interesting woman. And I definitely enjoyed this book. Plus, Monaco's gorgeous, so it's fun to even get to just experience the world of this book through the eyes of these characters. I really like reading about people's specific lives, which is why I enjoy a good celebrity historical fiction. I like when the person in the book is real, and I like getting to learn about their life through fictionalized stories. I think that it's really fun. It's a really great way for me to learn. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea. Not everyone's a huge fan of going through somebody's life through their eyes or through others. It's not your ideal read. But if it is, all 4 of these books are phenomenal. I enjoyed them all a ton. It was fun to get to live in these people's worlds, even for just a couple hundred pages. So I would definitely recommend them. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Happy reading.